These players may be moved before the start of the season. We'll discuss this and much more coming up on this episode of Hattrick HQ. I'm KC, joined by my co-host Mark Pye, and with that said, let's get right into the video. Our topic of the video today is these players may be moved before the season starts. And yes, with the offseason slowly coming to a close, a lot of teams and front offices are looking to finalize their roster with a couple of big names that have been released in a report by Lyle Richardson of Bleacher Report that are potentially could be trade rumored before the season starts. With that said, we'll get right into the first player, which is Connor Hellebuyck, goaltender for the Winnipeg Jets. And these are his stats, his career stats. He's spent his whole career with the Winnipeg organization. Last year, posting a .920 save percentage and with 37 wins in 64 games played. Mark, what do you think about a team potentially picking up Connor Hellebuyck in a trade?
I mean, Connor Hellebuyck came off a Vezina candidate season. He won the Vezina recently as well, and I think a team like Pittsburgh could be in on a guy like him. Seen last season, it was a bit of a shaky situation with Jarry, and I think a guy with Hellebuyck could almost like propel the team into that next step to get this core to one more Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I agree. I think Pittsburgh got a solid, top 12, and their defense was solid last year. But like you said, Tristan Jarry, he was solid in the past, but last year just had a bit of an off season. I think a trade to Pittsburgh would really propel them up the leaderboards and secure them a playoff spot for sure. And with that said, we'll get right into our second player of the video, which is William Nylander of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Mark, I know you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. We're going to look at William Nylander's stats for last season, which he had 87 points in 82 games played. Mark, what do you think about a potential William Nylander blockbuster trade for the Toronto Maple Leafs?
I think the biggest issue with trading someone like Nylander is you're not getting back a player of his caliber in a trade. If you send him in a trade, it's probably going to be a player that's a little lower than him and a few more pieces. And I think with Nylander, he's been such a big piece. He's always been a playoff performer for the Leafs. But it's one of those situations where it really depends on what you're getting back. And personally, if you can't get the contract done, you have to move him. But I think you work towards that contract and just hope for the best on that one.
Yeah, I agree. As a Montreal fan, even I love William Nylander. I'd say he's my favorite Toronto Maple Leaf. I think every year he's their best playoff performer by far, even though he's not the biggest star on the team. But any team that picks up William Nylander, they're just ready just to launch into orbit and just propel themselves into a deep playoff run. And we'll get right into our next player here, which is Noah Hanifin. And Noah Hanifin is currently with the Calgary Flames, a defenseman, 26 years old. Last year he had 38 points in 81 games. Mark, what do you think about Noah Hanifin moving on from the Flames?
With Noah Hanifin and the Flames, it seems like the Flames organization is kind of in a situation of where they're moving forward. Seen a couple of guys saying they don't want to extend, including Hanifin. And the big thing I would look at with this is a Nylander trade for Hanifin coming back in the package. I think Hanifin's a top four defenseman. He can play in your top 2 minutes. I think he can eat a lot of minutes. He can produce. He's a great defender. He's a big body, and I honestly think every team should be calling about him if he is on the move.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's probably one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. He's a great two-way player. He only put up 38 points last year, but he's just so solid on the back end that you don't need to worry about it when he's on the ice. He does the things that aren't on the stat line, and that's what you need in a defenseman. And we're going to go right into our next player, which is Erik Karlsson, another defenseman who is coming off a season with the San Jose Sharks. For the past 5 years, he's been a Shark, and then before then, he's known more for his time in Ottawa. And last season, he had 101 points on the back end, playing all 82 games. What do you think about Erik Karlsson? This would be a blockbuster trade as well.
Yeah, I think this is another thing that Karlsson has expressed that he did want to move on to a new team that's going to contend. The Sharks are obviously in a rebuild right now. And another thing is I think Pittsburgh's the team to watch with this one as well. You add a guy like that to their power play. They have Letang and Karlsson, which might not be the best defensively, but if you have a guy like Crosby, Malkin, Gensel, and one of these guys on the power play, that almost Karlsson's one of the best offensive defensemen in the league. He won the Norris this year, and I think just a team like Pittsburgh, it would almost like the Hellebuyck put them over that bump and get them to that Stanley Cup Finals again.
Yeah, I agree. Like, Pittsburgh's a team that their core three of like Letang, Malkin, and Crosby is kind of coming to an end here with all players getting up there in age, and I think adding a player like Erik Karlsson could definitely propel them and even try to make a Stanley Cup push for these guys who are like looking to retire in the coming years. And with that said, we'll get into our next player, who is another Flame, Elias Lindholm. As we take a look at Elias Lindholm's stats, a center, played the last 5 years in Calgary, but before then he was known for his time in the Carolina organization. Last year he put up 64 points in 80 games, and the year before that, 82 points in 82 games. What do you think about a potential Elias Lindholm trade?
With Lindholm, it's going to go back to the Hanifin thing. As a Leafs fan, if you are going to package someone like Nylander, if you can get back Hanifin and Lindholm in a trade, I think that'd be a major win for the Leafs. You lose a tiny bit of production with Lindholm, but he can play center. So if Tavares starts to get a little slow, you slide him to the wing. And I just think Lindholm would be an incredible add. He's a productive guy. He's amazing at passing. He can still pot you goals. And I think he can slide into any top six on any team.
Yeah, I find with a lot of these Western Canadian organizations, other than the Edmonton Oilers, you find a lot of good players there who are very underrated in this league, and I believe Elias Lindholm is one of them. He's a great draw taker, and obviously he's a point-per-game player last season, and now it's, like you said, Calgary is kind of in a weird spot. Like, do they go into a rebuild, or do they make a push? Because they got two of their top guys up here now on the trade block. And it's just a weird situation to be in when you added a guy like Jonathan Huberdeau just last year. But it'll be interesting to see what they do here in the coming weeks in the offseason, if they're going to try to make a push or if they're just going to sell.
Yeah, I guess the hard thing is both these guys are going into free agency next year. So it's almost like a Nylander situation. You don't want to juggle it and leave it till the last minute and lose these guys for nothing.
Yeah, for sure. Because they've had that happen to him before with Johnny Gaudreau. Sorry, Flames fans. But we'll get into our next player here, which is Mark Scheifele, Winnipeg Jet. We'll look at his stats here. A center, played all of his career in Winnipeg. Obviously, when you think of Winnipeg, you either go Mark Scheifele or Blake Wheeler for me. But we go 68 points in 81 games last season, and the season before that, he had 70 points in 67 games. What do you think about Mark Scheifele?
You've seen this offseason, Blake Wheeler getting moved out of Winnipeg. So you almost got to think do they really want to overturn all this leadership? As you've seen, there's a lot of rumors coming out for the past couple seasons that leadership was not the best there. So if they started taking calls on Connor Hellebuyck and Scheifele, you would think that both are going to get moved for a package, maybe prospects, picks, a couple of younger guys. And at the end of the day, I do think he gets moved. I hope not to the Leafs, because it's a famous quote of "there's no better feeling than beating the Leafs." Don't think he wants to play in Toronto. But, I think it's another guy that every contending team is definitely going to call on.
Yeah, I agree. Like, they're definitely going to move him, They're kind of moving towards a rebuild. I think they're going to try to get as many picks or as many prospects as they can for him. But on the receiving end, if you get a guy like Mark Scheifele, you're getting leadership in the room, you're getting a mentor for the young guys in your system, and you're getting a solid playoff player, a player who's going to come at you with all the force he can, and even take out Jake Evans behind the net. Sorry, Jets fans, had to get that one in there. I'm still not over it. But we'll get into our next player here. We'll go with Brett Pesce, our last player on the list here today. Defenseman coming out of Carolina. He spent his whole career in the Carolina organization, where he scored last year. He had 30 points in 82 games played. What do you think about Brett Pesce, adding him to maybe the Leafs roster?
I've seen a lot of rumors flying around that he would be a guy that might be in a Nylander trade if Nylander does get moved. I think Pesce could be coming in and be easily in your top pairing. He's a guy who's a shutdown guy. He's gritty. He's good in front of the net. He's shown he's a playoff guy, and I think with the Leafs, I would love him there. Moving Nylander for him is a little dicey because you lose a bit of scoring up on the top end. But I think a trade would benefit both teams. You add Nylander to the top 6 of Carolina, and then the Leafs get back debatably the best defenseman in a trade.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you move Nylander for Pesce, I think you're going to get a forward back with him in return, I believe, because Nylander, his value is so high. I think you might get a bottom 6 forward back with him that you can just slot in that rotation. I think the Toronto's offense will be fine with Marner, Matthews, Tavares, etc. But like you said, Brett Pesce does a lot of stuff that's not on the score sheet. Like I said before with Noah Hanifin, he's a guy who's really excels at net front battles. He's really good at tying someone's stick up when they're looking to maybe get a greasy one in front from a tip. But adding a guy like this to the Leafs D pairings is just going to make their depth even stronger than what it is now.
No, I agree. I think he'd be a perfect add for every team. Would like him on the Leafs more than most teams, but I think it's someone to keep an eye out for sure.
Well, guys, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like below, and make sure to comment down below where you think these guys are going to end up, and what's your dream destinations for some of these guys. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. And I've been KC, alongside my co-host Mark Pye. Keep your stick on the ice.